SharePoint is a great place to store data for your Power Apps projects. It's easy to set up and manage. However, one downside of this approach is that users of your app will also need to be given permissions to your lists in order for the app to work correctly. This means that your users could stumble across your list while in SharePoint and accidentally change or delete data, which could lead to inaccuracies or bugs for your app. I've seen various strategies for preventing users from accessing lists involving custom groups and various settings in SharePoint. In addition to being complex, some of these approaches could cause issues with Teams users if your SharePoint site is a team site, sometimes referred to as a group site. One note of caution, none of these approaches, including the subject of this video, are to be considered a secure solution, but rather a way to make it more difficult for users to discover and access your list while working in SharePoint. A determined user with enough technical knowledge can easily defeat these barriers. I'm going to show you a simple approach that can be accomplished through a very simple Power Automate flow. We're going to create a flow which sets a property called hidden on each list that we want to hide. Then we're going to create another version of this flow for unhiding each of these lists. That way you can make your lists visible for when you need to work on them and then hide them again when you're done. For this scenario, it makes sense to use a manual trigger since you'll probably be running this flow on an ad hoc basis. Here, we're initializing a variable to store an array of names of the lists we want to hide. This apply to each will loop through each item in our array variable. This final action is what actually hides the SharePoint list. Site address is set to the root address of your SharePoint site. Method is set to post. The URI is the only parameter in this section which includes a dynamic value. As shown here, it starts with an underscore, and the get by title portion has parentheses with single quotes inside. And inside the single quotes, we have the value of the current loop item, which is a SharePoint list name. Set both headers as shown here. The XHTTP method header is set to merge, and the if match header is set to asterisk. The body is in JSON format with hidden in single quotes and the whole expression wrapped in curly braces. After saving your flow, click the blue arrow in the upper left-hand portion of the screen to navigate to the flow detail screen. Next, click the Save As link to create a copy of this flow with a new name. This will launch a dialog where you enter the name of your new flow. The only change you need to make to this version of the flow is to update the body parameter so that the hidden property is set to false. Let's take a look at our new flows in action. Here we have our SharePoint lists on the left, and over here we have our flows on the right. First, we'll run the flow to hide the lists. I'll press F5 to refresh the SharePoint page, and the two lists are no longer visible. Next, we'll run the flow to show the lists. I'll press F5 to refresh the SharePoint page, and the two lists are now visible again. I hope you found this tutorial helpful. If you need immediate assistance with your project, please use the link in the description to schedule a one-on-one coaching session. We'll have a Zoom call to troubleshoot your issues and discuss any questions you may have.